What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the FF Ballbusters podcast. Thank you for joining us. My name is Eric. That's my co host, Will, and we are going to be talking some running back rankings and tiers today for the upcoming 2023 season. Pretty excited about it. But before we get into it, Will, how you doing this morning, man?
Hey man, I'm feeling good, and I'd be feeling even better if we hit our subscriber goal that we're trying to hit before the regular season starts. We're trying to get to
Yes.
500 subscribers before this regular season starts. We're almost at 400, and we thank each and every one of you for that contribution. We're trying to keep things going, so make sure you guys hit that like button, hit that comments as we're going through these tiers, and let us know what you think as we go through it. But with that being said, I think we can go ahead and just jump into it.
Absolutely. Let's get right into the action. And I think we're going to start at the top. There's a few names up here that I think we'll probably agree on, and then it might get a little bit dicey after that. Could be a volatile position to talk about. But yeah, let's start it off at the top. Who is going to be your RB1?
It's pretty obvious at this point. It's Mr. Christian McCaffrey. He's been the RB1 for a little while. Over the past 5 seasons, he's been the RB3, RB1, RB1, RB5, and RB2 in points per game. And ever since he joined the 49ers, there's only been one running back who's gotten more passes thrown in his direction. That's Mr. Austin Eckler. So Christian McCaffrey, in terms of being an asset, he's always been one, and he's going to continue to be one, especially in San Francisco.
Yeah, absolutely. Some people I think are pretty worried about the Elijah Moore split or Elijah Mitchell splits
Mhm.
in that San Francisco backfield. I'm not as worried about it, but I think it's probably important to talk about. He did see significantly less rush attempts and just about 8 less fantasy points per game last year when both of them were healthy and playing. So it's a substantial difference. But I'm kind of on the other end of the spectrum where we saw CMC get traded to the 49ers mid-season. Like he didn't know the playbook. He got put in right away, and he still produced at basically an RB1, RB2 level. And so if we see him with a full off season under his belt to truly learn the playbook, he's gonna get unleashed in a way that like maybe we've never seen. I'm pretty excited about it.
Absolutely agree.
And worth noting that Elijah Mitchell is already dealing with injuries in training camp and in practice right now. So something to note. All right, totally agree there. RB1 Christian McCaffrey. RB2, I actually did have uh, a little bit of back and forth with myself here as to who it was going to be, but they're both going to end up in the same tier for me. I'm going with Austin Eckler, who was the RB1 last year. Um, I expect pretty similar results, honestly, to what we've seen the past couple of years out of him. My only concern is that with everyone returning back healthy, and also with the new offensive coordinator Kellen Moore coming in, probably implementing a slightly more aggressive downfield passing attack, it could mean less targets for Eckler. But we're talking about a guy that was targeted 127 times last year, which I think was more than like CeeDee Lamb, more than like a lot of top receivers, really.
Sheesh.
So even if that comes down fairly significantly, he's still one of the top targeted running backs in the NFL.
No, I definitely agree with that. He's always been super involved in the passing game his whole career, and that's definitely not going to change now. So taking a look at the S tier as well. I'm taking a look. Everything's in alphabetical order. Going down to the S's, we got Mr. Saquon Barkley also in this tier for me.
Okay.
I still believe in Saquon the talent, and even more so, I believe that he's going to continue to get the volume in that offense. They didn't really bring in too many people to contest with him. Like they drafted Evan Hull to maybe contest a little bit in the passing game, possibly. He's not the best downhill runner.
Uh,
Am I thinking of the right person?
Evan Hall. Evan Hall's with the Colts. You're
Who am I thinking of? Eric
Eric
Gray?
Gray.
Eric Gray.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Eric
sorry. Two guys that probably aren't going to play a lot this year. But
Gray.
last year, he did play a full season for the first time since his rookie year. So that was extremely encouraging to see, especially with all the injury concerns. He was the RB5 overall and in points per game last season. He was third in touches from the running back position, fifth in yards from scrimmage per game, and also tied for 10th with 10 touchdowns. And he led all running backs in rate of snaps. So I don't see any indicators indicating that that's going to come down at all this season. In fact, they kind of agreed on some money, and Saquon is returning with the team officially. So I don't expect to see any type of decrease. I expect him to actually, hopefully, see him step up because this is essentially a contract year for him.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have any issues with the arguments for Saquon Barkley. That all makes a lot of sense to me. He was the RB5 in points per game last year. So far throughout training camp, it seems like him and Darren Waller, even in the passing game, are the two most targeted players in the offense. So he's going to be heavily involved once again. We have a little bit of disagreement here already.
Mm-hmm.
Saquon is my RB5
Okay.
currently, and in a second tier. But also, the way that I have it organized, I kind of have a lot of tiers, which
Okay.
maybe would be too many for the video. So I can understand condensing and consolidating some of them for sure. But anyway, as far as rankings, my third running back is going to be Bijan Robinson.
Okay. I like it. I'm not mad at that.
Um, one, just from a prospect standpoint, like he's one of the best we've seen probably since Saquon or since Zeke. You know, he's a top elite level prospect coming into the NFL. And just looking at like the rushing stats from the Falcons team as a whole, if you take their rushing work from last year and give Bijan 65% of it, and then project, a slight uptick in receiving work since that's his forte. He's so good at that compared to the backs that were there last year, and give him say like 80% of that because he's going to get the majority of the receiving work there. If you don't increase efficiency or account for any talent increase, he's already a top four back with those numbers based on last year's results. And so, if you do bump up the yards per carry, the yards per reception for a guy as talented as Bijan, and also consider the improved offensive line, I think they're probably a top five unit in the NFL, at least in terms of run blocking coming into this year. It could be a ceiling even higher than that. So I think he's worthy of being at least up in this tier and conversation.
I was about to say I completely agree. Just to bring up some other stats to help kind of bolster that as well for Atlanta. They led the NFL last year, or at least the running backs last year led the NFL in rushing yards. They led in yards per carry with 4.9. They ranked second in expected points per carry. They were third in success rate, and they were third in rate of carries to result in a first down or touchdown with 25.7%. And again, that's with a bunch of guys, the hodgepodge group of people, and not even with an elite prospect like Bijan Robinson. So,
Yeah,
yeah, there's a lot to look forward to in that offense with Bijan for sure.
absolutely. Okay, so I had my top three in a tier, and then it broke off.
Okay.
But I'm realizing now that for the sake of the video, it probably makes some more sense to not have as many tiers, as many tier breaks as I have.
Okay.
Um, so I guess it's back to you. Who would your next guy be if you have one in the S tier, or does it break?
So I did have one more person here, and it was actually
Okay,
Tony Pollard. He's somebody I've
yeah,
been turning around a lot on lately.
agreed.
But just to talk about it a little bit, last year Tony Pollard was able to essentially break out while still having Ezekiel Elliott there and still playing as well. He followed his breakout in 2021 with an RB8 overall scoring season last year. He racked up 1,378 yards and 12 touchdowns, which is amazing. The only issue with the touchdowns is it's sort of a weird, fluky stat for him because only three of them came from inside the 20. So he did have a lot of long touchdowns, which is probably going to come
Yeah,
down. But with the fact that Zeke isn't there and he is clearly the goal line back for this offense now, he should get more of those opportunities. So I'm expecting to see a little bit of touchdown regression, but at the same time, I'm expecting to see him get more valuable touches as well, and still get a lot of those breakout runs too, because he is that explosive player still, especially behind this offensive line. What do you have for Mr. Tony Pollard? Because I know you've been very high on him as well.
yeah, he's currently my RB4, just in front of Saquon. From week 7 until week 17, I don't include 18 just because that's when he went down with injury. He averaged 19.3 half PPR fantasy points per game. The RB1 last year, Austin Eckler, averaged 18.8. So, like, I understand it's a smaller sample size. I understand that with a slightly increased role, his efficiency is probably going to come down. But, I mean, if you give him more opportunities, even if the efficiency comes down a little bit, overall it's going to balance out fairly well. I saw a stat from, I'm forgetting who it is on Twitter now, so I can't credit them. Apologies. But I think if you kept his efficiency and gave him 25% of the work vacated by Zeke, he would be the RB3. If you gave him 35% of the work, he'd be the RB2. If you gave him 40% of the work, he'd be the RB1. And that's also including the full season of work where he wasn't getting that much touches and run in the first 6 weeks and the injury week in week 18. So, uh, cherry picking or not, the guy was incredible, and I fully expect him to have a top five fantasy season this year.
No, I 100% agree.
All right, so we are in agreement that that is going to break off that S tier.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
All right, guys, wait. Don't leave. I know we got the easy ones out the way, but before things get a little bit spicier, we did want to remind you guys to subscribe. We're trying to hit 500 subscribers before the regular season starts. We're almost at 400 now, so please help us get there. But with that being said, we got so much fantasy football content. Eric, what do we got for the people if they subscribe?
We got tons of stuff for you guys. We got preseason recaps. We got positional rankings. We got round by round draft strategies. We got mock drafts and even more coming out down the pipeline. So really stick with us, subscribe to the channel like Will said, and we will provide you with the best possible fantasy content to get you guys ready for your fantasy drafts.
Now back to the show.
All right, so let's work our way down to the A tier. There's still plenty of elite backs to talk about. And I feel like there's going to be some disagreement in here. This is probably going to be a fairly large tier, at least it is for me. But I'm going to start us off with the number 6 overall running back here being Nick Chubb.
Yeah, I like that.
Very, very little concerns with Nick Chubb coming into 2023. We saw him last year be the RB1 for the first, 12 weeks of the season. He was fantastic, off to a really hot start with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. Deshaun Watson came in and it kind of slowed things down for the entire offense in general. But we hope to see that change with a full offseason of Deshaun Watson being with the team, getting some chemistry down. We expect the offense to probably improve in efficiency and hopefully stay on the field longer, have more touchdown opportunities, red zone opportunities, and stuff like that. And also with Kareem Hunt gone, there's been all this talk about Nick Chubb getting more targets in this offense. I'm a little bit wary of that. Like, I'm not going to project a super high target increase just because we've seen him for 6 years of his career not be heavily targeted.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to project a huge jump. But even if we see a slight uptick in targets and we see the same rushing load and efficiency, maybe with some touchdown increase, like, we're talking about a top 5 guy. So it's hard to even rank him this far down.
No, I 100% agree. And the team has been talking about getting them more involved in the passing game. And even if we see like a Derrick Henry-esque increase in the passing game, that's still a lot of volume right there. That's a lot of points to be added to, a person's overall score. So I like Nick Chubb there a lot, especially since I think Kareem Hunt he was 3rd last year in like routes run by a running back, I'm pretty sure. So
he was significantly involved. Yeah.
So if that even gets split up between Nick Chubb and Jerome Ford, there's a lot to be found in that, a lot of value to be found in that.
And you bring up Jerome Ford, which is good to bring up, but he's also dealing with injury right now.
Right.
We'll see how long it takes him to recover. But yeah, Nick Chubb is kind of alone in the backfield at the moment.
Absolutely. And just while we're on the topic, even though I'm not super worried myself, at least about individual rankings, because I feel like this is kind of a weird tier for it. But my next up, I have Mr. Derrick Henry, someone who's pretty similar to Nick Chubb. Hyper involved, obviously. Like, Derrick Henry pretty much was the offense, and he's probably going to be the offense again this year. He led the NFL last year in rushing attempts for the 3rd time over the last 4 years. And he had almost 2,000 yards and 13 touchdowns. And he set career highs in the passing game, like I had just alluded to, caught 33 passes off of 41 attempts for almost 400 yards. And he has shown some signs of, I guess, wear and tear over time. He is getting older. He's turned 29. He just turned 29 in January. So he is getting on the older side. But one thing that is a little interesting to me about Derrick Henry, which is kind of why I do have him ranked here, do you remember the trade talks and stuff like that were going on earlier for Derrick?
Yeah.
This offseason? I have a feeling, or at least, this is a hunch, but there could be a chance. If he stays with Tennessee, of course, he's going to be the offense. He's going to be who they're running everything through. But there is a chance he does get traded during the season as well. And if he were to get traded, it would most likely be to a contender, which means he could get more valuable opportunities as well. Something similar like Christian McCaffrey when he got traded last year. But, of course, that's just speculation. Even if he were to just stay with Tennessee, he is that offense. He is the focal point of that offense, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. It's just a matter of if this is the year he takes a step back, and I don't really think so. Not yet, at least.
It's so hard to project that with him because he just keeps proving us wrong. My head tells me to be concerned. My brain tells me, last year was one of his least efficient rushing years of his career. He seemed to take a step back in terms of average yards per carry. You mentioned his increase in passing game involvement, which was good to see, but that offensive line, by most rankers is easily the worst offensive line in football. Like it's going to be so bad. He's going to have no help in front of him. It's certainly not going to be efficient. I don't think there's going to be a ton of red zone opportunities. I don't think the Titans are going to be that good. He is the offense.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree. It's going to be, it's going to be about volume, not about efficiency. And yeah, then like when I go to my heart, it's like he's not human. He's the Yeti. Like
Yeah.
he's never gonna break down. He's just gonna continue to do what he does. So I'm kind of torn and conflicted as to where I have him ranked. Right now, I have him as my RB8. But yeah,
I
it's
mean,
tough to sell either way.
hell, he's projected to get like 120 points every year at least just off the Texans alone. So he's gonna do okay, I think.
And I think he sees him in the fantasy playoffs again this year too. So could be scary. Nah, that's funny.
Uh,
But I like it. I like it. Next guy I have up on the list as my RB7, but I guess our overall consensus, what, RB8,
mm-hmm.
would be Josh Jacobs.
Okay.
Um, Obviously, there's concern there. He's not with the team currently. Not pleased with the way that the team's being run, not pleased with his contract situation. We've seen it from his teammates even. Devontae Adams is also a little bit unhappy with the way that things are being run out there in Vegas. So there's concern that the holdout might be real. It might last into the season, and if that's the case, obviously we still have like 3 weeks before the season starts. If that continues, then we'll adjust and our ranks will change. But I'm assuming, just based on the running back market and the lack of leverage that he has, that he is going to be returning to the team and playing the entirety of the season. And with that being said, he was the RB3 last year. He was fantastic. He saw one of the highest years in terms of receptions of his career with 53. Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be another check down god over there, so he's probably going to see a similar amount. And there's no reason that the team wouldn't just want to continue to ride him as the best player in the offense and just run him into the ground. So I could see him repeating that if he does come back to the team.
No, I 100% agree. I 100% agree with that. We kind of thought the opposite last year going into the season just because of how they were using them, and then they absolutely used them the heck out of them. Like
Yeah.
you said, from a leverage standpoint, he doesn't really have much, so he's probably going to have to come back this year at least. And one thing I guess I wanted to say before we head out, this is just like a gambling thing, but I saw that Underdog, shout out to Underdog, our sponsors, use promo code FFLW, but they had over half of a receiving touchdown for Josh Jacobs for this season, like for people to bet on. And
Total for the season?
I believe for the season, yeah. And
What?
it made me take a look back. He doesn't have a single one his whole career.
Wait. Let me. I need to pull up the stats to see this for myself.
Mm-hmm.
How is that possible?
That's what I was wondering myself, but he doesn't have a single one his entire career, not a single receiving touchdown.
That's insane. He has 200 total targets and 160 receptions for his career, over 1,000 yards receiving, 0 receiving touchdowns. What an interesting little nugget. I like that.
Yeah, so just something, I guess, like if you're thinking the receiving touchdowns are going to go up for Josh Jacobs, we don't know, really.
Up from what?
Yeah, we've never seen it. But it's just an interesting little stat I came across yesterday when I saw that on Underdog. So probably shouldn't take that bet, to be honest with you, but hey.
Okay. I like it. I like it.
But getting back into fantasy football stuff.
All right, so where are we at now? RB9?
Yeah, I
This
guess
is going to be back to you.
RB9. So we're coming back to the running backs, of course, and back to our tier list. I've got Mr. Jonathan Taylor here
Okay.
because he's another person I feel like he's gonna have to come back because in terms of leverage, he doesn't really have much, and the team is also trying to figure out ways to void a year for him, and I think he wants to avoid that as much as possible.
Yeah.
So he's going to end up showing up, I believe, at some point. But of course, 2021 was a monstrous season for Jonathan Taylor. Last year, not so much. But that was also because he got injured in week 4, got injured again a couple weeks later, and then got hurt again week 15 and was shut down for the season. So we didn't really get to see much of Jonathan Taylor last year. Me personally, I think that Jonathan Taylor, he was the RB1 in overall scoring in 2021. But one thing we have to remember is that it was the lowest scoring season for an RB1 since 2012. And it was mostly done off of rushing yards, which isn't the most steady metric, especially with this Colts team who's kind of going through some changes and some growing pains. So me
Yeah.
personally, I'm a big fan of, I guess kind of the controversy right now. Not so much for Jonathan Taylor because I want him to get paid, but so much so because I like that it's driven his price down a little bit to more realistic of where I feel like he's going to end up finishing around. Like I think he could outperform this ADP of where we have him right now, like the running back 9. But at the same time, I feel like it is a little bit more realistic to keep him in that top 10, but not so much in that high end range because I just don't see any of the upside in terms of the passing game because we got Anthony Richardson back there now. And in terms of rushing quarterbacks, we always see a downtick in terms of check downs to running backs. And
Yeah.
also in terms of the fact he's a rookie quarterback, and we haven't seen a whole lot of RB1s play with rookie quarterbacks in the past at all. I believe like one of
Yeah.
the last ones is like Tiki Barber, so it's been quite a while.
That's a pull.
Yeah,
It's been a minute.
yeah.
Yeah, I definitely see the concerns to the point where I have him down lower. I actually have him as my RB11. There's obviously the concerns about whether he's going to return to the team. Honestly, I think he'd be in a better situation if he was traded. I think returning to the Colts is what's most likely. And like you mentioned, Anthony Richardson, Russian quarterback, so one less receiving work, which you were hoping was going to get an uptick. Now he's not. I think probably less overall rushing work because Anthony Richardson's going to take a lot of that,
Hmm.
and then significantly less goal line work and red zone work because I think Anthony Richardson's going to get a fair amount of that as well. Considering Shane Steichen is coming over, we saw what that meant for Jalen Hurts in the red zone last year, 13 rushing touchdowns. So yeah, I'm really concerned about Jonathan Taylor this year, and we haven't even mentioned the potential injury that he's dealing with right now, the back
Hmm.
injury that's kind of up in the air as to what the severity is or whether it's real or not. So yeah, I'm definitely nervous. Obviously, he's incredibly talented in terms of pure talent, one of the best backs in the league. And 2 years ago, he was the RB1. So he absolutely has high end finishes in his range of outcomes. But it seems a little sketchy for me, so I got him a little bit lower.
100% agree.
Um, but my next running back on the list here is going to be Brees Hall.
Hmm.
Um, now that the Dalvin Cook kind of signing rumors have died down a little bit, not that he can't go there, not that he won't go there, um, but it seemed like almost a certainty that he was going to go to the Jets, and it seemed like Brees Hall's ADP got driven down a ton. And I think that's going to be to a lot of people's benefit when you're drafting him because I think he's closer to recovery than a lot of people realize in terms of his ACL. He's back and participating, and I think is probably going to be back to full strength within the first couple weeks of the season.
Hmm.
This offensive line is going to be slightly better than what we saw last year, and I think the team overall is going to be way more efficient with Aaron Rodgers under center. And we saw him be one of the most efficient backs in all of football in a limited sample size before his ACL injury last year, both on the ground and in the receiving game. And so, yeah, I fully expect him to have a breakout type season in 2023.
Yeah, I fully agree. Especially after that, he gets more comfortable on that knee and gets rolling because as high as he tested athletically, he should bounce back pretty well, especially during that like
Yeah.
stretch of the season. So I definitely agree with that pick right there. I got Mr. Mixon next,
Okay.
but it's something that we talked about. I feel like in terms of rankings, we have him right here, or at least I have him right here at like the RB. This is 11 at this point. Do you
Yeah.
think that Joe Mixon is going to finish lower than the RB11 this season, given the fact that like his situation hasn't really changed? He's still with the Bengals. They brought in Chase Brown, but like I don't think he's really going to contend for too much this season. As long as Joe Mixon stays healthy and the legal issues stay out the way, is he really going to end any lower than this?
It's tough to project that. He's been what, like the RB6 and RB8 the past 2 seasons in the same situation. So yeah, it's hard to say that he's going to finish lower than that. I personally have him at RB14. So I have him ranked
Okay.
outside of that spot, but you make a good point. Uh, Honestly, it's probably more likely that he ends up as an RB1 inside that top 12 than not.
Yeah, just because they don't have Samaje Perine, I feel like that was his biggest competition. And now
Yeah.
Travion Williams, is that his name? He's hurt right now, dealing with an ankle
Yep.
injury. Chris Evans was kind of balling in the preseason game, but he's never really been more than a change of pace, third down back anyway. So
He's not good.
yeah,
He's not good.
so I think that just in terms of opportunity, Joe Mixon has all the opportunity in that high-powered offense that he's just always kind of had.
Yeah,
with a lot
I
of
think
guys
that's
with a
more than
lack of
fair.
experience behind them. So
Yeah. I will say if Joe Mixon is going to be the next guy on the list, I think this is a tier break. I think
okay,
this goes down to B tier. You cool
okay,
with that?
yeah,
Okay. Um, who would be next for me? I think it's going to be Ramondre.
I like that, Mondre.
So last year, in terms of points per game, he was the RB 14. Obviously, he started the season in a little bit of a split, still with Damian Harris while he was healthy. And then once Damian Harris kind of went down and dealt with some injuries, Ramondre really came on strong. He was clearly the lead back. He was fantastic in the receiving game with 88 targets and 69 receptions. Incredibly consistent as well on a week to week basis. You never had to worry about him busting or not helping your team win each fantasy week. Um, and I expect not necessarily an increase in usage. I think 88 targets is pretty high. That might even come down a little bit. But I expect the overall offensive efficiency in New England to jump up pretty considerably. We were talking about an offense that was run by Matt Patricia and Joe Judge last year. They didn't know what they were doing at all. And now we get to see B.O.B., Bill O'Brien, come in as the offensive coordinator, who you can argue, and I would agree, is not a very good head coach, but we've seen him in offensive coordinator positions succeed time and time again. So, yeah, I think this Patriots team is going to take a step up. I think that's going to mean definitely more touchdown opportunities for Ramondre, which is where he was lacking the most last year. I think he only scored a total of 6. And with the volume that he had, that seems very, very low.
No, I 100% agree with that. He's also like been one of the most used like Patriots running backs in a while as well. Did you know
Yeah.
that? Yeah. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah,
But
I mean the whole stigma around New England is that they're a committee team. So he's breaking that mold for sure.
yeah, because as in terms of the people that are behind him now, like Pierre Strong, stuff like that, they're obviously not as good as like a Damian Harris. And Damian Harris last year, even when he was back healthy, wasn't really taking a whole lot of volume away from Ramondre. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think that is encouraging to see for sure.
And worth noting that the team is definitely pursuing another veteran back to sign, and I fully expect that to happen. I just don't think it's going to cut too significantly into his workload.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so taking a look at the next spot right here for Ramondre, I've got Mr. Where is he at? Where's he at? Mr. ETN Travis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I do still like the volume. I think that Tank Bixby is going to be more of a player than people are, giving him credit for. But I still do
Yeah.
think that the team is behind Travis Etienne. They want to get him more involved. Travis Etienne himself has been saying he wants to get more involved in the passing game, become more of a natural pass catcher, which all indications we've seen this offseason is that he's gotten better and gotten more comfortable out there catching passes. He seemed a little skittish
Yeah.
last year for sure, especially in games. But um, I expect to see, him to be efficient like he was last year. This team has gotten better, so things should open up more for him in that backfield as well. But I don't know how many of the goal line touches he's going to get in this offense because I think that role may go over to Tank Bigsby. He may end up ceding that role. But I do think that Travis Etienne is going to be more of a focus when it comes to the passing game, getting more of that volume. And I think he is still going to get primary opportunity in the backfield until Tank Bigsby is able to overcome or is able to, I guess sort of take the reins. So for the time being, it is Travis Etienne's backfield to lose.
Yeah, I completely agree. I have him slightly lower than this, but all of the points that you brought up make a lot of sense to me. He was one of the most efficient and certainly, I think, by the numbers, the most explosive running back in the NFL on the ground last year. Um, Slightly disappointing in the receiving game, like you mentioned, but hopefully we get to see a slight uptick in that, more so to what we saw from him those last 2 years in Clemson with Trevor Lawrence. If we can see that connection continue, I think it would mean big things for him coming into 2023. So yeah, I like that ranking there. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Next on my list is going to be another, kind of weapon, versatile player that I'm really excited about. Rookie Jahmyr Gibbs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't. I think people are discounting how little rushing volume he needs to be an RB1 this year. Like we saw it from Alvin Kamara his rookie year. We saw it from Christian McCaffrey his rookie year. I think we're probably going to see similar things from Bijan with the rushing volume, and I think we're going to see Jahmyr Gibbs do it even if he doesn't get the rushing volume, even if he only gets 125, 150 carries this year. If he sees 80, 90 targets, right around that 65, 70 reception mark with the efficiency that we saw from him in his college career, and even if we, take a slight downtick in that as he bumps up in competition,
Mm-hmm.
he projects out to be inside the top 10 for me. I'm not willing to rank him all the way up there quite yet. I currently have him as my RB12. But like if we just go based on the projections that I have, like he's one of the top candidates to outproduce his current ranking for me.
Yeah, I think with his pass catching ability, like you said, it gives him an immediate floor in this offense because, like you said,
Yeah.
we've seen DeAndre Swift barely really play a whole lot, but still somehow get 70 targets in a season. Which means
Yeah.
if Jahmyr Gibbs is able to stay healthier than DeAndre Swift was and was able to get that volume, absolutely his floor is through the roof at that point. Like its floor almost becomes a ceiling. Like you said, it raises him up to that point where he can be a top 10 back pretty easily.
Yeah, I mean, DeAndre Swift only played 14 games last year. He only had 99 total rushing attempts, 70 targets. He still had 12 points per game and was the RB18 in points per game. Like, I fully expect all of those numbers to go up with Jahmyr Gibbs. So, I don't know. It blows me away looking at the numbers, how little he has to do on the ground and can still be an elite fantasy asset.
I 100% agree with that. It's just like you said,
Yeah.
that passing floor raises things so much. It raises things so
Yeah.
much. And speaking of a passing floor, someone who had a big one his rookie year, hoping to see that again this year, but I'm not really sure how the team's going to use him. I've got Najee Harris also in this tier.
Yep.
Where is
Agreed.
he at? There he is. Just in terms of volume, he's been up there with the best of them. He definitely he saw a decline in just about every metric you could look at last year, but I feel like everyone on the team saw a decline in every metric you could see last year because the team was going through a lot. They had started the season with Mitch Trubisky at quarterback, trying to figure things out with Kenny Pickett. So it was a mess over there until Kenny was sort of able to find his footing. And when Kenny did kind of find his footing, Najee Harris did take a step up in terms of his production throughout the rest of that season, I will say.
Yeah.
So he definitely rebounded in that aspect. He also started out the season with some sort of mysterious foot injury that we've kind of figured out was a Liz Frank. So he had to play the first 5 games of the season with like a metal plate in his cleats. So that's something that's
Yeah.
also going to take a tip down in terms of his productivity as well. But he's sort of been dependent on volume. We'd like to see his efficiency come up, but this is also one of the best offensive lines Najee Harris has ever played within his career in the NFL. So we're hoping that seeing all of that will help to see a rise in his production because with the volume alone, he's able to, sort of finish as a top 10 running back. But if he's able to turn that volume and also be efficient with it as well, I think he could do something special. And I don't think Jaylen Warren is as big of a worry as people, believe he is. He did get a good amount of play in the last preseason game. We'll talk about that. Or that video's already out, right? It should be out by
That
now.
video is going to be out before
Yeah.
this one, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and check that one
Preseason
out.
recap.
Yeah, check that preseason recap out if you guys want to see how people were getting used and what we think is going to be their future indicators. But I don't think Jaylen Warren's usage is a big indicator into Najee Harris not being used until Najee's able to, if he goes out there and sucks, he's going to get replaced. But I think he's going to get that opportunity to suck first.
Yeah, I completely agree. And if you want an even more in-depth breakdown of the Najee Harris situation, we actually did one a little bit earlier this offseason over on the League Winners channel, specifically all about Najee Harris. And so, yeah, if you're interested in that, go check it out. But I agree with his ranking spot here. I think it's pretty funny that we're even with 5 running backs in each of these tiers so far, but I think this would probably be the end of this tier for me. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. You said you have 5 in this tier?
No,
Oh, like pretty much
am
5.
I missing somebody? Sorry, guys, we're not looking at the same screens. Who's in the B tier for us right now?
Mondre, ETN, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Najee Harris.
Isn't Mixon in there?
Mixon was at the end of A for me, but I can move him down to B.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I kind of like him in B better.
Okay.
You think Mixon deserves to be in the same tier as like Chubb, Jacobs, Henry?
I think in terms of volume and in terms of the role in his offense and the fact he is in a good offense as well, I think so, personally.
Okay.
Like I think his range of outcomes, he's more likely to be top 10 than outside of the top 10. At least in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean that's fair.
But
All right.
I also see all the concerns as well. I also see the dip in efficiency. I see all of that because we saw Joe
Yeah, yeah.
Mixon last year. He wasn't really all that great consistently across games, but he did have a few boom weeks as well. Something to keep into account.
He
He had
had
like
a
a 55
massive
point
boom
week.
week.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was like what, almost 25% of his production or something crazy. Maybe
yes.
not that high,
Well,
but a ridiculous
a
number.
pretty sizable amount. So I'm cool with bumping him down to B.
Yeah. Okay. All right. But yeah, let's move down to the C tier now. And I think that's gonna be led off for me by Mr. Aaron Jones.
I like that.
Um, I don't have a ton to say. Like we've seen year in and year out the production from Aaron Jones. He's been consistent. He was the RB11 in terms of points per game last year. I expect this team with Jordan Love now to lean pretty heavily on the running game. And so maybe a slight uptick in attempts and rushing yards for Aaron Jones. He's always been efficient. The one thing that we saw from him last year that was kind of out of the ordinary was not very many rushing touchdowns. Typically, that's a strength of his game and somewhere where he excels. He only saw two last year. And so I expect that to go up. I expect the receiving work to probably be in a similar range. And so if that's what we're projecting from a guy that finished as the RB11 last year, maybe this is too low. But I'm concerned kind of for the offense as a whole with Jordan Love. I'm not a huge believer. And so I think might be less red zone opportunities. They're staying on the field not as long, stuff like that. So that's the only real concern for me with Aaron Jones.
No, I definitely agree. Even looking back at the games, in the games where he did score a touchdown, he was an RB1 in all five of those games, averaged 24.7 points per game. In the other 12
Yeah,
games where he didn't score, he was an RB2 or better just four times and averaged 10.4 points per game. So,
that's a significant difference.
yeah. So it is a little iffy. When you get Aaron Jones, you kind of know what you're signing up for, and it's one of those like a Gabe Davis type of up and down roller coaster almost.
Yeah.
Aaron
Yep.
Jones is extremely efficient. I believe he can get it done if he gets the opportunity, but for some reason, they just don't really love giving Aaron Jones, that free reign in the backfield, really.
And especially at the goal line, like I get that you have a bowling ball in AJ Dillon, but in terms of like actual efficiency at the goal line, Aaron Jones is one of the best goal line backs we've seen in the past decade in terms of just converting and getting into the end zone. So it's weird to me that as an NFL team you wouldn't see that and continue to use him that way.
Yeah, but have you seen his quads, though, bro?
That's a good argument, I guess.
All right. All right. And then the next back I have in this tier as well, I've got Mr. James Conner. Just
Agreed.
another person who they don't really have anybody else in terms of running backs over in why am I blanking? In Arizona right
Arizona.
now? Yeah, in
Yeah.
Arizona. It's pretty much just him and Keontae Ingram. But Keontae Ingram didn't really do too much. He got 60 yards on 27 carries last year. Not the best.
Yeah.
Um,
No.
but when James Conner is available, and again, that's a pretty big qualifier. He's out there and he's used heavily on that field. Just taking a look, coming back from injury in week 9 through 17 when he was active last year, he was 8th in the NFL in rushing yards, 7th in EPA per carry, and 7th in success rate per carry. And like I said, they don't have anybody behind him still. So there's really no real competition to James Conner and not being the bell cow back. It's just that he's a bell cow back on what is going to be a dumpster fire of a team most likely this year. Um,
Probably the worst team in the NFL.
yeah. Yeah. But in terms of volume, he's
Yeah.
going to be out there and he'd be catching passes too. James Conner has always been a dual threat when it comes to running and catching passes out the backfield. And I expect to see that
Yep.
and continue, but it's just going to be on a really bad team.
Yeah. But I mean, they were a really bad team last year too.
They've
And
kind of
like you
always
said, we
been a
saw him
really bad
produce
team. Kind of. Low
for
key.
for the majority of the time that he's been there. Yeah. But yeah, like you mentioned, even last year without efficiency and all that stuff, he was still the RB10 in points per game. He saw 58 targets, 46 receptions, and that's only playing 13 games overall. So if he can stay healthy, which is a huge question mark, then his overall numbers are going to be higher, but the points per game numbers I think are going to be there just on volume alone. Um, and yeah, we saw his actual splits like with Kyler Murray versus with Colt McCoy. They actually improved with Colt McCoy on the field. So even if Kyler isn't on the field to start the season or isn't there for a while, I wouldn't be worried about it. Yeah, I expect him to succeed in a terrible situation.
Yeah,
All right, then the next guy on the list here pains me to say it a little bit. I wonder if you'll disagree, but he's just too talented for me to really draft him any further. It's going to be Kenneth Walker.
I like it. I actually do like it. I was wondering when one of us was going to pull the
Okay.
trigger on it.
Yeah, we've been not haters of Kenneth Walker the player, but kind of haters of the situation. We've ranked him pretty substantially lower throughout the offseason than he has been. I think the market is kind of coming more towards our side of the story here, and starting to lower him a little bit. I think we're still probably below his actual ADP. Let's see. Fantasy Pros has him as the RB 17. Where are we at? Are we at? No, we're at 18. So I
18.
guess it's not that much different. Yeah. So it's closing in. He had a fantastic rookie year. He started a little bit slow. Rashad Penny was still there, and then he, was dealing with that groin injury in the preseason and the first couple weeks of the season. But once he got healthy, he turned into the guy that we saw at Michigan State. Really efficient, lots of explosive plays. Not a ton of pass game involvement, and I expect that to kind of continue to be the case now with Charbonnet in the backfield. The real worry is that he's going to lose red zone touches to Charbonnet as well, because he's shown the ability to get that done, and he's the bigger back as well. So there's definitely concern as to where the work is going to be distributed in the Seattle backfield. But I think this is going to be a good offense. There's going to be plenty of opportunities, and he's just too talented to really let him fall too much further.
No, I 100% agree. I think that Kenneth Walker sort of entered the league as sort of a boomer bust type of runner, and then he sort of established himself in the fantasy community as more consistent than that, which I don't think has really been the truth. When you really look at the stats, I don't think that's really been the truth that he's been consistent. I think he's been more boomer bust as well. But the weeks that he
Yeah.
booms and he does do really well, he's able to find a lot of footing in here because, like you said, Seattle values the running back position quite a bit, and
Yep.
and they're pretty stubborn with it as well. But in terms of him as a pass catcher too, he's pretty much a non-factor in terms of pass catching last year. He was 103rd in receiving grade amongst running backs on Pro Football Focus in 2022. He also had .67 yards per out run, which was 57th at the position. Zach Charbonnet coming in, we already know he's probably going to be a good pass catching back. They've also got other guys who can catch passes out the backfield as well, with like DJ Dallas and stuff, but I'm not too worried about them. But
Yeah.
I think Zach Charbonnet steps in and kind of immediately takes that away. So the only concern I have with Kenneth Walker is that he may become a little bit touchdown dependent because his volume is going to come a lot from rushing. But at the same
Yeah.
time, they value the running back position out there. This is a good team. They should score often. So that should be a good indicator for Kenneth Walker going forward.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, at this range of running backs that we're getting to, it's going to be hard to find anybody that you really trust on a week to week consistency basis. So I'll take
Absolutely.
the upside. Okay, so let's go back to you.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be what, RB 19?
RB19. This one might be a little
Yeah,
spicy, just a little bit. I'm
let's
putting
hear it.
Mr. Javante Williams here.
Ooh, okay, okay.
And I know the concerns. He tore his ACL, LCL, and he's tore like one of the corners of of his knee, I believe, like a muscle that connects to the knee as well. So
Was the PCL involved too, or am I adding too much?
I think
I'm
it
gonna
was
look it up.
PCO. Yeah, I think it was
Yeah,
PCO. So the front half of the season could be a little bit limited, but not the entire 2023 season, in my opinion. His so the way I look at Javante Williams and I rank them right here, I feel like he's a great running back for people who are going like zero RB, who have like those two great receivers. They're looking for a
yeah,
running back that's young, could have some upside. And I think that, Javante Williams could be that guy. Obviously, they have Samaje Perine, who they also brought in, but he's been more of a pass down specialist, where Javante Williams more of an all around early down grinder, more so even. So I think that his high workload, at least to start off the season, is going to be, 50-50 at the very least between him and Samaje. But as time goes along, that's probably going to increase because he has been very much so ahead of schedule in terms of his recovery, in terms of everything. They're saying he's going to be ready for week 1 to play. So I imagine by week 6, he should even be rolling by then, I'd imagine. And if he is, I feel like he has a lot of upside in that offense, especially since it should be taking an uptick. They have Sean Payton back there, and we've seen what Sean Payton's been able to do with his running back committees too. So I do like I
yeah,
like Javante Williams in this spot, I feel like.
yeah. With the amount of question marks that I have around all the guys in this range, it's hard for me to argue against it necessarily. I do have him pretty substantially further down.
Hmm.
But yeah, the recovery timetable that we've seen from him has been incredible. I'm gonna be a little bit more pessimistic than you, just in terms of what I'm going to expect from him in the first half of the season.
Hmm.
I'm going to temper expectations with how significant the knee injury was. I did look it up. It was ACL, LCL, PCL, and yeah, I guess it doesn't say specifically whether it was quad or hamstring or whatever, but there was like another, like you mentioned, tear of a different muscle group. It's a lot to recover from. It's a lot to come back from, not only physically but also mentally, to have confidence in that knee in year one off the return. But considering he's incredibly young and super athletic, he fits the build for somebody that could do it and come back and be productive year one. I'm also just concerned with the track record that we've seen from Sean Payton in using committees. So even if he is fully healthy, I don't know that he's going to get more than like 55, 60% of the backfield work. I'm just limiting expectations a little bit more than you, but I see
Hmm.
the upside for sure. Of the names that are on this list, he probably has the highest upside left.
No, that's completely fair. 100%.
All right. And then another guy who's now 2 years removed from a fairly similar and catastrophic knee injury, J.K. Dobbins, is going to be in this tier for me. Um, like I mentioned, further removed, so I'm less worried about the injury concerns. He's still currently not holding out, but holding in. He's in the Ravens facility, but I don't think participating in practices right now. Don't think it's actually injury related, even though he's technically on the PUP. I think it's more of a contract situation that's keeping him off the field. But in terms of talent, he's incredibly talented, one of the most efficient running backs in all of football since he's entered the NFL, and was in college too. Like situationally, it's been great for him because the Ravens running backs are all really efficient. But that dates back even to Ohio State when he was back there in college. He's always had a high level of efficiency. With this change in offensive play style from the Ravens, I do think it's going to benefit J.K. He's going to get a similar kind of rushing load, but I think he's actually going to get more receiving work as well. Lamar Jackson is still a rushing quarterback, so I don't expect it to be like a high volume, but I expect an uptick from what we've seen in years past for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think J.K. Dobbins is primed for a big season because, like you said, changing the offense, retooling it should help make him be even more efficient, even more sort of help them exploit some of that explosiveness that J.K. Dobbins has that we haven't really gotten an opportunity to see yet in his career.
Yeah.
And would this be where the tier breaks for you, or would you have somebody else in this tier as well?
It's getting real confusing over here on my side, to be honest.
Yeah,
We're so in between tiers. I don't mind breaking the tier off here, especially just to kind of keep it clean since we got five, 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 and five.
it
It's
is
looking
looking kind
nice.
of it is looking kind of nice to be honest with you.
Let's do it.
All right, bet. So to start off the D tier for me, I'm gonna have Mr. Miles Sanders here for the Carolina
Okay.
Panthers. Somebody who I think could end up outperforming his ADP, but let's talk about it. He ended 2022 as the RB15 in overall scoring and the RB22 in points per game. He had career highs in rushing yards with 1,269, 1,347 yards from scrimmage. What's up?
Yeah, hold up. You said the RB22 in points per game?
Yeah, is that incorrect or is that? Am I looking at the wrong format?
Uh, I'm so maybe we're looking at different scoring settings. I'm looking at half PPR on fantasy data, and it has him as the RB16 in points per game at 12.2.
Oh, okay. So RB16 in
So
points per
even
game.
better.
What did I? Yeah, I don't know what
Yeah.
I was looking at. I might have been looking at standard. But RB22, and that's with him sort of having the least receiving output he's had in his career. It's only dwindled more and more since his rookie year. And since he's gone to Carolina, he's working with one of his old running back coaches who has openly expressed that they want to get him more involved in the passing game. And I also believe that fits more Bryce Young's game as well. Bryce Young,
Yeah.
he is able to run, but he's never been a run first quarterback ever in his career. So I do see a good amount of checkdowns going to the running back position, especially since, sort of the receivers he has out there, it's sort of a hodgepodge in terms of like DJ Chark, Adam Thielen, Jonathan Mingo. Miles Sanders has very much of a possibility to step in as one of the better receiving options on this team pretty early on. And if that
Yeah.
happens, I think that raises his ceiling quite a bit in terms of getting him more involved. And he's been pretty efficient on the ground up to this point as well. So if he's able to combine those two, able to get more receiving work as well, I could see him even outperforming his ADP.
Yeah, I agree. We saw him come from the Eagles last year, where he was incredibly efficient, and that's going to happen when you're in arguably the best offense in football, at least top three. He had, I believe, let me check before I say this out loud. Okay, I was actually wrong. I was going to say one of the more efficient rushing seasons of his career, but he's had in 2020 5.3 yards per carry, 2021 5.5, and this was down to 5. So he's always been fairly efficient. I feel like it is going to take a slight downtick coming to Carolina, just because the offense in general is going to be significantly worse. The offensive line is going to be significantly worse. And there's not going to be as much of a threat around him. You're talking about A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, like a crazy receiving group that the defense has had to account for. But you make a really good point that we could see a pretty significant uptick in his receiving work. And so the decrease in efficiency with that added on, and potentially an uptick in volume as well, could kind of balance out. And so if it does do that, we're talking about a guy that was around the RB16 last year. And so this might be even a little too low.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. My tier maker decided that it didn't want to load anymore. Oh, there it is. It came back. We're good. But yeah, the next guy on the list for me, and so many of these guys are kind of just interchangeable at this point. It's tough to really rank them individually. But the guy that I have next is Dameon Pierce.
Okay.
We saw kind of an interesting season from him last year. Obviously, the first few weeks as a rookie, he wasn't all that involved. He wasn't all that efficient until the team really decided to hand him the keys. And then on tape, at least, we saw really, really impressive running, just a violent running back that was not only powerful and able to break through contact, but also really elusive and fairly impressive in the receiving game as well. Really well-rounded back. There's some concerns coming into this year with Devin Singletary being added to the team that he might take away some third down snaps and just, a little bit in between the 20s as well. But I expect this team to be incredibly run heavy, probably even more than last year. One, because that just probably suits them with a rookie quarterback in CJ Stroud and the way that their team is organized, but also because of the coaching staff. They bring in, what's his name from San Francisco?
DeMeco Ryans.
Yeah, so they bring in that San Francisco type offense. I expect it to be a rush heavy attack with Dameon Pierce at the helm. So I do expect him to be fairly efficient and still get a decent amount of receiving work. Hopefully not with the same slowdown that we saw at the end of the season as well. And if that is the case, then maybe this is even a little bit too low. But just kind of trying to put him in the middle perspective here, or middle tier projection, I think this is about where he belongs.
Yeah, I completely agree because Dameon Pierce is one of those guys, if you look at him play, you're like, wow, this guy's really good. And then you look at the stats and you're like, oh, yeah, he is on the Texans. But
Yep.
but the thing with Devin Singletary, where I guess technically we've talked about this now since our preseason video should be out by now. But with the way
True,
they used
yep.
Devin Singletary in the preseason, Dameon Pierce got to rest, so he didn't play that first game at all. And Devin Singletary was actually the early down back during those snaps. And they had Dare Abungawale come in for the third down pass and stuff. So we thought that Devin Singletary would possibly be that change of pace back and would eat into more, maybe even some early down stuff. But it's looking more like he could even be a handcuff to Dameon Pierce, which would just open up things even more for Dameon Pierce, even possibly. So that's a good indicator for him for sure.
Absolutely. All right, let's go back to you for our RB22 or no 23.
Wart. So we are gonna go for the RB23. I feel like it's been too long at this point. We let him slide a little bit too far. I'm gonna put Alvin Kamara in this spot. I feel like
okay.
I feel like, we know that he's going to be suspended now. We know he's going to be suspended for 3 games, no appeals. So it's definitely going to be 3 games. But in terms of the offense that he's stepping into now, he should be stepping into a much better, well, not much better, but a better offense than he did last year. Derek Carr should be an upgrade over Andy Dalton. His pass usage should go up, especially from the times like we saw him playing with like Jameis Winston, a guy who doesn't ever really check down to the running backs ever, versus, Andy Dalton, someone who did. So we should see somewhat of a, I guess, meld between the two, some sort of mixture between the two. But I feel like Derek Carr overall is a better quarterback than both of those two. And just to give Kamara a little bit of leeway, because they have been trying to use him more as a running back between the tackles and not so much, in the passing game like they used to. And with that being said, he ran up against 8 or more defenders in the box on 46.6% of his carries, and that was the 7th highest rate amongst running backs. And that followed up 51.2% that he had the year before. So I don't know why they keep trying to use him as a between the tackles running back, because teams are keying in on it and they've been able to pretty much stop it for the most part. But if they get back to using them more as that, running back that is catching balls out of the backfield, being deployed in more creative ways, now that they have like a Jamal Williams who can be that between the tackles guy primarily, I think Alvin Kamara should become more efficient and should get closer to what we saw with his earlier career production. There's going to be sort of a decline. He is older now. But at the same time, I think if we get back to his more natural role in that backfield and them having Jamal Williams there to help out, I think we could see more of earlier Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, I can definitely see that argument. We saw, or I'm sorry, I guess what I wanted to talk about was kind of what's transpired so far this offseason in that running back room. Kendre Miller was getting kind of a lot of hype coming into the season. A fairly talented prospect out of TCU, but he was dealing with a knee injury throughout the offseason and has now, I don't know if it's the same injury, but he's come down with another knee sprain.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really going to impact his usage this season. You want to see the early involvement in camp and in the preseason so that they can get into the flow of the offense and earn that trust with the team. Because a guy like Jamal Williams, has all of the trust in the world from the coaching staff. He's that steady, dependent rock that's going to get the ball. And so I think now that probably opens things up even more for Alvin Kamara, knowing that really Jamal is the only guy that he's going to have to overtake in the backfield in terms of carries. He's not going to have to compete with Kendre too much. So yeah, I can definitely see the increase in efficiency coming back. We just have to hope that he stays healthy and that this team isn't a total dumpster fire.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I guess this will get us to our RB24. We can end it here, but I will just bring up some other names because I feel like people are going to get mad. There's a few names on here that I think are consensus-wise ranked considerably higher. The guy that I would put here is Rachaad White. We've talked kind of extensively throughout the offseason about not really liking Rachaad White that much. He showed incredible inefficiency last year. To be fair, behind one of the worst offensive lines in football that was decimated by injuries. So I give him, a little bit of leeway there. But even in the passing game, his yards per reception was not efficient, and that's supposed to be the strength of his game. Situationally, as far as the other running backs in the backfield, there's not much competition there. So he might just volume his way to good numbers, but we're going from Tom Brady to Baker Mayfield probably. We still have a terrible offensive line. It's hard for me to trust that this team is going to stay on the field long enough for him to really be that relevant. But garbage time, I guess he could rack up some numbers.
Yeah, what you're hoping for with Rachaad White is you're hoping for the Buccaneers to be really bad. You're hoping for them to have to throw their way into a lot of games and for them to have to use him as a pass catcher, because he has been much better as a pass catcher than as a runner. So that's what you're hoping for with Rachaad White. And the chances of that, I'd imagine, pretty high for the Buccaneers. They're not going to be too good this year.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, let's talk about a few other kind of honorable mentions here. Who else do you have in this category?
Another person that, we'd be kind of amiss to not bring up at the very least would be Alexander Mattison. At least to have a discussion about him. I'm not super confident in Alexander Mattison myself. I know a lot of people do have him ranked up here, probably even higher into the top 24. A lot of people think he's going to capture a lot of that success where's he ranked at now?
20 by Fantasy Pros.
Yeah, so a lot of people think he's going to end up, just kind of slotting in, taking over that role Dalvin Cook had, and maybe not be as good as Dalvin Cook, but with the volume alone, they think he's going to have an uptick. We're not super confident in that, especially after these preseason games. The coaches were kind of raving about Ty Chandler, somebody who we didn't even really see, I guess, as the primary pass catching back, or, I don't even know how to put it. But
yeah,
Alexander Mattison is not going to step in and be Dalvin Cook. I don't know who needs to hear that, but he's not going to step in and be Dalvin Cook. But we would be amiss to at least not bring him up. Dalvin Cook, also somebody who wasn't on this tier list, and he's not going to be on this tier list until he's on a team, unfortunately. It's tough to rank somebody who's just not on a team. And someone else I wanted to bring up, DeAndre Swift. Some people are higher on DeAndre Swift, I feel like, than we are. But being honest, I don't really see the role that DeAndre Swift is going to have in this offense. He's going to have to be very good running the ball, because in terms of his passing work, that's going to come down quite a bit. He got more targets last year with the Lions by himself when he didn't play for 6 games, as opposed to every running back on the Philadelphia Eagles last year combined. So I don't see that same ceiling that DeAndre Swift used to have, unless he just becomes the world's most premier between the tackles runner, and he just stays healthy the whole season. He's scoring a lot of touchdowns, and I don't see that happening in this offense. Now when they have Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, Rashad Penny even back there in the backfield, Kenneth Gainwell, who's apparently their early down grinder. I don't see much of a role for DeAndre Swift outside of him being on a really good football team and a really good football player. But for fantasy, I don't see the upside.
He's going to be efficient. When he touches the ball, it's probably going to be exciting. I do think he's a good running back. Like, he's a good player. But, yeah, the amount of work and the type of work isn't going to be valuable enough for him to kind of creep into this range for us.
Yeah.
And then two other names that I just wanted to bring up. Cam Akers, he's even higher in the consensus rankings. I think they have him at 19. And David Montgomery, I think, are two names that at least kind of belong in the conversation. David Montgomery, just because he's in a really efficient offense and is probably going to be the early down and potentially red zone guy there for the Lions. Cam Akers, because there's not much competition. Similar kind of story to Rachaad White, where, nobody's going to be really fighting him for work in a bad offense. We'll see what type of receiving work he gets. That's never really been his strong suit. But also recovering from the Achilles injury. Lots of things going on there with Cam Akers that make me doubt what he's going to return for you in fantasy.
Absolutely. There's too many question marks, really.
Yeah. But yeah, think that will wrap it up. I hope you guys enjoyed. Like we mentioned, please let us know what you guys think of our tier list, where you would have guys ranked down in the comments below, whether you agree, disagree, if there's anybody we left off, anybody that should be higher, any of that good stuff. We respond to all the comments, and we love to engage with you guys, so hit us up down there. There's also a link to our Discord in the description below if you want to have an even deeper conversation, talk to us directly, talk to any of the people that we have in our community so far. We got a really good group over there. And yeah, subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed. We got lots more content coming out to get you guys prepared for your fantasy drafts here in a few weeks. And so yeah, stick with us there. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that good stuff. Yeah, Will, you got some more things to tell the people?
Yeah, just make sure you guys check out those links in our description down below for all of our sponsors over at Dynasty Owner, over at Do Numbers, our partners with the Fantasy Football League winners. We got a lot of new writers, a lot of new content creators over there, so a lot of new stuff to get you guys ready for this season that is coming up very soon, so check them out. We also make videos for them as well. And we're sponsored through them as well by Underdog Fantasy, so use our promo code FFLW. They'll match your deposit up to $100 if you're a first-time user. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and if you made it this far into the video, we love you, and we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
Peace.